other news, something very exciting which I've been bottling up inside and not allowed to tell anyone, and it's been so hard, is that me and Dan have been given cameo roles in Big Hero 6 in UK cinemas.
I have some concerns.
Big Hero 6 is a movie that I'm just barely above indifferent towards. I think it's a competently made movie, but just kind of unremarkable and a weird outlier considering the much better Disney movies that were coming out around it. But even though the movie itself is nothing special, there are still some interesting things to take away from it. For example, you're probably at least vaguely aware that the movie is based on a Marvel comic, but did you know that in those comics, Baymax looked like this?
Yeah, going for a non-threatening, huggable kind of thing.
And that's not even the most jarring fact about this movie. Well, okay, it is, but let me ask you this. When the topic of Big Hero 6 and YouTube comes up in conversation, what comes to mind? That's right, Schaffrillas Productions.
That was his mistake.
What the fuck, dude? But another two people that come to mind are Dan and Phil. It's not uncommon for animation studios to take bit parts or celebrity cameos in their movies and replace them with other celebrities for international releases.
There's only one fella can handle a job like that, and frankly,
he don't like to be disturbed.
This later evolved to UK releases including British YouTubers like Joe Sugg and Casper Lee in Sponge Out of Water, and Dan and Phil in Big Hero 6. Now, I love Dan and Phil. Figured I should mention that, it might be a little too subtle. So even though I didn't have particularly strong feelings about the movie as I was watching it, the fact that two genuinely funny, entertaining YouTubers I really liked were going to be in it was something I was pretty excited to see. But I knew not to go in expecting the world from these two because, as Dan himself put it,
you have two lines.
And as Phil also put it years later,
acting. It's a skill I do not have.
But when I got to their cameos, as happy as I am for them, I kind of feel like Disney could have handled it better. What do I mean by that? Well, let's take a look at the actual scene. Dan and Phil's cameo appears roughly an hour into the movie. The heroes and hero have just infiltrated the secret lair of the villain.
Alistair.
No, it's Robert Callahan. Let's just get that out of the way now.
That was his mistake.
And it's here where they find out his backstory and motivations behind the crimes he's committed. We learn via video recording that his daughter Abigail was a test subject for a teleportation device. Despite warnings that the machine is unsafe, the test goes ahead, resulting in Abigail getting lost between transport points, effectively stranding her outside her own universe forever. This eventually led Callahan to become a supervillain to get revenge on the man responsible.
You knew it was unsafe. My daughter is gone because of your arrogance.
And it's this scene where Dan and Phil make their appearances as everyone's favorite Disney characters, Technician 1 and Technician 2.
Sir, we picked up a slight irregularity in the magnetic containment field.
Field breach, abort! We've lost all contact with the pod. Field breach, abort! We lost all contact with the pod. I went from British to American. I'm not really rating myself that highly there.
Now, I'm not the first to pick apart why Robert Callahan is not an especially great villain. But I guess his motivation is fine enough. Yeah, someone basically killed his daughter and got away with it, so now he wants revenge. Makes sense, sure, whatever. But riddle me this. Let's say you have a character with a tragic backstory involving losing a loved one, turning him from a kind, successful, and ambitious man into a hateful and remorseless criminal with no goal in life beyond spreading his own suffering to the man who caused it. Of all the things you can include to help get that sad, heartbreaking story across, what possesses you to include a cameo from the Lady Door guys? I'm not saying that to be a hater. I want to stress that. I wanted to see them in a Disney movie. But I wanted to see them in a light-hearted scene where they have something funny to say. Instead, we get a very crucial scene that's meant to be a driving force throughout the rest of the film, and throughout the scene, instead of thinking about the story, I'm just sitting there thinking to myself, oh look, it's Dan and Phil. It doesn't even feel like a particularly great use of their abilities. Like I said, Dan and Phil are naturally very funny guys who have great chemistry and arguably one of the most devoted fan bases on all of YouTube. It just doesn't make sense to me why Disney wouldn't cast them in roles that would play to their strengths and actually be appealing to that fan base. I mean, with all the Dan and Phil moments that have been memed into oblivion with these guys essentially just being themselves, whose biggest desire in the Dan and Phil community was to hear Dan read the line, "Sir, we've picked up a slight irregularity in the magnetic containment field"? The problem goes further than just being immersion breaking, but it also clashes with the tone of the scene. This pseudo flashback is supposed to be really tense and shocking as we see this disaster breaking out with the characters desperately trying to stop it before any more harm is done. But the thing is that Dan and Phil at the end of the day are comedians, which in this particular context kinda works to their detriment. When I hear two voices which I generally associate with making me laugh, and you just out of nowhere put them in a scene which is meant to be very serious and stressful, I honestly found myself kind of giggling throughout it.
The pilot is gone. Portal 2 is down. The magnetic containment field is down.
I'm sorry, I'm sure they're trying their best, and maybe it's just me, but it feels like they're doing a bit. Like, Dan and Phil, from the beginning, have always openly portrayed themselves as two socially awkward, nerdy weirdos, and that's what we love about them.
Random pop culture references from nerd fandoms and just being a bit of a lol random problematic dweeb will get you far in life.
So when you place them in scenarios like this, it feels like a parody, something that they would do on their own channels as a joke.
What the fuck?
I'm not saying that I think putting someone from this type of background or career in a more dramatic context is inherently a bad idea. Believe me, nothing would give me greater pleasure than to see Dan and Phil trying their hand at serious acting and being able to say on video, would you believe they're actually really good? But what Disney doesn't seem to understand is that there's a difference between gracefully putting a comedian in a dramatic setting in a way that gives the audience a chance to adjust, versus crowbarring them into a different context than we're used to, then advertising the fact that it's those funny people specifically and encouraging their fans to see the movie on that basis. Now, look, I try to be constructive whenever I criticize something in a video. If I see something in a movie that I think has room for improvement, I like to be able to try and suggest what that improvement should be. I was initially going to suggest another part of the movie where Dan and Phil could have appeared. You know, a more comedic scene which isn't as high stakes compared to the rest of the story. But after thinking about it, I realized there aren't really many other speaking roles from extras in this movie. If you want to graft a couple of celebrity cameos onto some minor characters, it's pretty slim pickings. I don't know at what point during the film's production Dan and Phil were cast, but I would assume pretty late in development, and that the reason they were cast in this scene was because there was nowhere else to put them. But I wouldn't really consider that much of a defense, because all that suggests is that they just threw Dan and Phil into any scene that was handy, either without considering or just ignoring how it would affect the scene. Which, if that's the case, I think maybe that should tell you that this wasn't the best movie to put them in. Hell, if you look at the other Disney movies that were coming out around the time of Big Hero 6, there were plenty of bit parts that they could have been hired for, like these two roommate antelopes from Zootopia.
Oh, hi! I'm Judy, your new neighbor.
Yeah? Well, we're loud. Don't expect us to apologize for it.
I mean, they wouldn't be wrong.
No! I'm wearing slippers and fucking what? Fuck you! We don't know
the neighbour that way. What are they thinking? There might be a bedroom there.
I mean, rip that person's marriage, whoever's that is.
I know that I've mentioned a lot in this video how much I genuinely do like Dan and Phil, and I'm sorry if that's come off as repetitive. I think it's just that making a video on a popular YouTuber makes it seem like I'm trying to stir up drama. When I make a video criticizing a director or an actor I like, I typically don't feel like I have anything to worry about because 9 times out of 10 they've got better things to do than worry about some random guy on the internet. But in the case of Dan and Phil, I'm doing this on YouTube. This is their own domain. There is the chance, however small, that one of them could see this video and think that I'm just clickbaiting for attention, and that's not the impression I want to give to two people I really admire, even if I don't know them. So, for what it's worth, any criticism I've made about their cameos in Big Hero 6, I do not blame them for in the slightest. They were just told to come in, say a couple lines, and then smile for the camera. Disney are the ones that made them part of a crucial scene rather than just a light bit of comic relief, which probably would have been more appropriate. As far as I'm concerned, it's Disney's fault for not managing it better, something that Dan and Phil are no strangers to by their own admission. But hey, if they're able to poke fun at their own Disney cameos, hopefully I can too. I mean, after all, Kuishi ni Kucheka.
Kuishi ni Kucheka, live with a laugh and a smile.
This is the sequel to Hakuna Matata! What the f is happening?
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. You'll find the link in the description below. For just $1.50 a month, you'll get access to all my videos before they get released on YouTube, and you'll also get to see a few alternate thumbnails I made while I was working on the video. If that interests you, then check it out. Like I said, links in the description.